Sisters Heidi Smith and Beck Thing tell me that supporting the 100th episode of Life Journey was an easy decision. Heidi and Beck love all things about good people and the bush. The opportunities, the sense of connection, the grit and the ability to get stuff done. It's with this in mind and a combined 30 years experience helping people in a coaching and consulting capacity that Heidi and Beck developed Rise, a 12-week personal development program designed for busy women ready to take good to great, or even for those who found themselves in a bit of a rut. The program covers direction, goal setting, planning, time management, mindset, execution, and has an interesting take on motivation. Delivered via live online sessions, a portal rich with content and one-on-one coaching, plus the opportunity to work with like-minded women. If you're lacking that sense of achievement and fulfillment in life or business, if you're looking for direction to get more out of your week and day, or accountability, this program is for you. And if you think you can't afford the time to do it, chances are you can't afford not to. Reach out to the girls for more information via housepaddockconsulting.com.au. The 9th of August 2002 is a day that changed our family forever. It was on this day that our beautiful sister-in-law Gayle became caught in a post-hole digger, which almost took her life. I think our whole community lost a sense of their innocence that day. Having something so unimaginable happen to one of us was difficult to comprehend. Gayle, though, has led the way with her husband Mac by her side to show us that everything is possible with love, hope and courage. Gayle, this has been a long time coming. I was a bit scared to ask you to do it because I didn't want to put pressure on you, but I'm really glad that you agreed to do it without too much coercion.
Thank you, and like you said, it's something that we have forever, and nieces and nephews, children in the future can see.
Yeah, exactly. Let's start at the beginning. So the Valley of Lagoons in your childhood. Talk me through what it was like living there and what your childhood was like.
So we grew up on the headwaters of the Burdekin River on a beautiful property called Valley of Lagoons, and we had the most amazing free childhood. I don't know what Mum and Dad thought we were doing, but we'd disappear all day. I'd take an orange in my saddlebag and we'd just be down the river all day, just exploring and swimming our horses and doing amazing things and having such a wonderful free childhood. But it taught us to be independent. We had so much fun, and my sisters would build a fire at lunchtime and cook up mussels and try and make me eat them, which I wouldn't do. But yeah, I really wonder what Mum and Dad thought we were doing, but it was amazing childhood. Yeah. And as we grew up, 4 girls, our father and mother instilled a very good work ethic into us, and, we had to work hard and do the things that boys did because he had no sons. But yeah, I just feel so blessed that we all got to grow up the way we did and where we did it. It was an incredible property and we loved every minute of it. We'd go out in the mustering camps and camp out for 2 weeks, 4 times a year, and yeah, it was an incredible place to grow up.
So Gayle, given the wonderful childhood you had, it must have been really tough to leave to go to boarding school.
It was, and we did School of the Air, correspondence school, and so we only saw other kids once a year at the mini schools we went to once a year, the summer schools we called them back then. So we had no interaction with other kids. So I actually went when I was 11. I went to boarding school so that Sherry and I, my older sister, went at the same year. So I was 11, and it was such a cultural shock moving to town for one, but in a dormitory with 10 to a room, and it was extra tough, I felt, for me because I was in grade 7 and there was no other year 7 boarders. So I had to walk across to the primary school each day and then come back and cement friendships with the year 8s at the boarding house. But I had some wonderful friends there, and look, it was just a complete culture shock, but I think boarding school is good for us.
Yeah.
And I didn't love it, but it was something that we all had to do, and it was a very good life experience for all of us.
Gayle, would you share the story about when it was really dry at home and you were sad at boarding school? Because I really do love this story.
Yeah, well, I mean, we all got homesick, and I was really particularly homesick this year. I think I was in grade 8, and it was a drought year. And I remember when I went to boarding school, I told myself if I didn't cry for the whole term, it would rain. I'm not sure what the outcome was. I can't remember if it worked, but it was my incentive to try not to cry myself to sleep every night, thinking about home.
Yeah, yeah. I think that one of the toughest things about boarding school is for bush kids is to go and live with other people.
Yes.
Where you're so used to being on your own, and even though you had your sisters, but you were used to doing stuff on your own and having your own company. So was that really difficult?
It was, and you know, you're in a confined space with lots and lots of girls with all different personalities, and 10 to a room in bunks, and it was just such a culture shock. But I think it teaches you good life lessons, how to get on with people, how, you know, all those things socially. And yeah, I'm so glad I went to boarding school, because we were such shy, terribly shy bush kids, and it makes you come out of your shell. Yeah.
So let's talk about MacArthur. When did you meet Mac?
I met Mac at a camp draft when he was 18 and I was 21.
Cougar.
I think. Yeah. Maybe 20. Yeah, so we met at Polithanga camp draft, and he was a character right from day one. I had a sticking plaster under my chin where my young gelding had struck me when I was shoeing and knocked me out and split my chin. And I rode into the cutout yard, and he sung out, "What did you do? Cut yourself shaving." So that was his pickup line, and it worked. And that's when our lives came together, and we were together from then on. So we were very young. He was very young, and I'm very lucky he came into my life.
I remember we had to go out to Longreach to our mother-in-law's parents' 60th wedding anniversary.
Yes.
And Mac bailed up and wouldn't come with us. And he said to Gang, his grandfather, "You wait until you meet her, Gang, you'll understand why I didn't come."
That's funny.
Oh, but anyway. So Gayle, your dad really did think a lot about setting you girls up. So the decision was made to sell the Valley of Lagoons so that you could each work towards having your own places, and that's how you came to be at Cantor Park, isn't it?
That's correct, yes. Dad, he was tough on us, and he didn't hand out things to us, but his whole focus in life was setting us up for our future. So, like an example, when we lived at Valley of Lagoons, we weren't allowed to use the telephone. When the first daughter left boarding school, he put a coin phone in, and that was the way it was. But he always was thinking about setting us up and what our future would look like. So I was 25 when we sold Valley of Lagoons, and that decision was Dad based on wanting to get down into central Queensland and onto the better buffalo country. And, as much as we loved it up there and it was beautiful, he was trying to set us all up on a property each with country that we can breed and fatten. Yeah.
And that's a brave thing to do, because the place, for your dad to make that decision, and also for you girls, because there's nothing like the place you grow up on, is there? And it means it's so much more than a house, and it's so much more than a property, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's where,
your whole childhood memories are.
Yes.
And it was very sad for all of us to go, and it was a huge job leaving there. But look, we all understood why he was doing it, and we all agreed. And it was just very sad to leave such an amazing place.
But leave you did, and we've been very lucky because you live just half an hour from us, and it's been wonderful for our families to just be so close together. And then Sherry, your sister, one of your sisters lives half now the other way, and we're kind of in the middle. So the way it worked out, it was just amazing.
And the location is just ideal for us, and we love being where we are. So we moved to Cantor Park in 2000. So we'd been married a year then. We got married in 1999, and so we've been there ever since. So Mac was 21 when we got married and I was 24, and we lived at his parents' property for 12 months and then moved to Miles Springs.
To Cantor.
To Cantor Park, sorry.
Yes. Yeah. So Gayle, you'd only been there about 2 years, hadn't you?
Yes. So September 2000 we moved there, and my accident was in August 2002. So we'd only been at Cantor for 2 years, and we'd only been married for nearly 3. So we had our third wedding anniversary in Sydney in hospital. Yeah.
So talk me through that day of what you remember and maybe what you've been told too.
Yes. So I don't remember. My accident happened about 7 in the morning, and I don't remember anything of that day. I don't remember getting up or having breakfast or anything. So the whole thing's wiped. I don't remember any of the time after the accident when I was conscious. But it happened about 7 o'clock, and they carried me into the house, which was, we were doing the garden fence, digging post holes around the garden fence. And lucky for me, I was knocked out for about 5 minutes, and then I woke up, and I was conscious then until the flying doctor arrived, but I don't remember any of it. And I think it must be the body's way of shutting out all the memory and the pain of the whole experience is what I'm putting it down to.
I remember getting the phone call, Gayle, and from Berry's dad, and I think Mac must have rung Harry, and he told us, and I'll never forget it, and he said, Gayle's had an accident and she's lost a limb, and we had our 2 kids then, so Hutton and Amy, and we just jumped in, threw them in the car, dropped them off at my friend Paula's, just threw them out of the car. She was, the Heelan family were amazing that day anyway. And we went up there, and all the way up I was praying, and I just thought there has to be a mistake. We'll get up there and it won't be as bad. Because I think it's so hard to comprehend that can happen.
Yeah, in a heartbeat.
Yeah. And but anyway, so when, they took you through to Townsville, didn't they?
Yes. So before I left Cantor Park, the doctor from Moranbah arrived about 2 hours afterwards, and so did the flying doctor plane, and I think the helicopter sort of all got there around the same time. So I was awake, and apparently I kept saying to Mac, can you put my arm down? I thought my arm was above my head, but he said there was just a gaping black hole on my right side, and my left arm was compound fractures top and bottom, and my thigh was compound fracture. Luckily no internal injuries really, but I had a big laceration to my face and cut my eyelid in half and up my forehead. But yes, I kept saying to him, can you put my arm down? Can you put my arm down? So I must have felt like my arm was up above my head, and the flying doctor sort of did a little operation on me to sort of stem the bleeding, and I think they put me to sleep and did something to my right arm where the arm was missing, and then got me onto the plane. And I think Mac had put my right arm, which was the whole arm and shoulder blade, in the freezer, just in case. And they put me on the plane, and then I think I was meant to go to Brisbane, but they decided that I was at risk of losing my left leg because I had compound fracture to my femur. I wasn't getting any blood to my lower leg. So they decided to, I think mid-air, they opened up my groin and transferred blood from a vein in my groin down to below my knee. And that's why they went to Townsville, so it was a shorter trip. Yeah, would have been chaotic, I imagine.
They are, just the whole medical team that day, like the doctor just dropping everything from Moranbah and driving out, And, that next morning he rang us to make sure we were okay, and no doubt he rang, talked to other family as well. But, just the way people can come together and save people's lives. And we'd be lost without CQ rescue helicopter, Royal Flying Doctor Service.
Especially, yes, absolutely, in remote areas. And we actually met some of the people that were involved when they reenacted and they're just amazing. They're such caring people, and we had such amazing people that day, thank goodness for me.
Yeah. So Gayle, what was it like for you, can you remember what it was like finding out you'd lost your arm? And then I think it was a day later, they told us that the arm that was there wasn't ever going to work again. So what was that like for you?
So for me, I was obviously in intensive care for a while, so that's all gone from my memory. But when I moved out of intensive care, I went into high dependency in Townsville Base Hospital. And it seems strange to me now that first of all, the amputated arm, I knew it was gone. And I think, I was on lots of painkillers and everything, and it just sort of I seemed to accept it pretty quickly, which I'm not sure how that came about, but whether it just all, in a strange environment and full of painkillers, it all seemed to just go on board in a reasonably accepting manner. But it never occurred to me that I couldn't move my left arm. So it had several fractures and it was all bandaged up beside my body. But for some reason, it didn't occur to me that I couldn't move it, or whether I wasn't trying to move it. And I think my family tried to sort of keep that information from me for a few days, that it was no longer going to work, that it was paralysed. And a nurse slipped something out and I questioned her and found out that was the case. Look, I feel like I accepted it quite well straight away, but I think I had so many injuries and it was so such a massive thing. I just sort of thought in my head, right, I just got to get over it and things might be better than I expect. So I guess the reality of it didn't kick in probably until later on, when I was more healthy and more coherent, I suppose. And they told me that I would get terrible neuropathic pain in my paralysed arm. And they said it would take about 3 weeks before it would kick in. And they were trialling drugs in Townsville to try and stop it from happening. And they were exactly right. It took about 3 weeks. And then this horrific nerve pain started, and it's with me forever. And it's something that a lot of people don't know about. I didn't know that paralysed people could have pain in a dead limb, but with my particular injury, it's a brachial plexus injury, so all the nerves pulled out of my spinal cord. The nerve root sends signals to the brain saying there's something wrong, so it's just a constant cycle of saying your body's screaming at you that something's wrong. And that was a whole new realisation that that's something I had to deal with forever.
So did the drugs help with that a bit, Gayle?
Yeah, so they give me actually epileptic medication. So I don't have epilepsy, but it dulls the nerve sensors. So it definitely helps, but it by no means takes it away. And certain things make it a lot worse. Humidity is number one. Mm-hmm. And then when you're tired, when you're stressed, it seems to increase the pain. And I've always told myself back then that if there was no advances in medicine, I'd remove my paralysed arm after about 10 years, because a lot of people with this injury do, because it's so heavy and dragging on the body and it just ends up being a nuisance. But I guess I've never been able to make that decision because I don't have another arm, and obviously most people do have one functioning arm. So, and I thought if I would remove it if it helped with the pain, but because the pain signals are generated in the brain, it feels to me like the pain's in my hand. but it's not really in my hand. So removing the arm, they told me right from the beginning, removing the arm wouldn't make any difference to the nerve pain.
So you still get phantom pain on the other side?
Look, I do. It feels like my arm is short, like it's a shrunken version of my arm, and it's jammed right up against my chest, and my wrist is bent over. But it's, look, I deal with it quite fine. It's not something that bothers me. And with the nerve pain, one of the tickets is to relieve it, is to try and distract yourself. So when I'm doing bookwork and things like that where I'm really concentrating, it does really help.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And we actually put a TV in our room eventually, and because I would wake up in the middle of the night with the nerve pain, and if I could watch TV or something like that, it can turn your brain off to the pain to a degree.
Yeah. So Gayle, your dad was, and your mum, both of them were very, very strong right from the get-go, but your dad didn't accept that they couldn't do anything for this other arm, and it used to just hang down. So talk me through how, you know, you came to be in Sydney, and because that was your dad's doing, wasn't it?
Well, it was. And so in Townsville, they kind of told us that just before I left Townsville, they did a nerve conduction study. So they stuck needles into nerves coming out of my spine that worked my arm, and they established 100% that it was paralysed. So the guy actually said, there's nothing we can do, go home and learn to live with it. And thanks to my family digging a little deeper, they found neurosurgeons in Sydney, and it was actually my dad that said, why can't they plug the right arm nerves, which are still attached to her spinal cord, across into the left arm? And sounded funny at the time, but that's exactly what they did. So my family, through an orthopaedic surgeon in Townsville, helped them find the people in Sydney. And so I spent 3 weeks in Townsville and then flew to Sydney and was there for 2 months, and got a wonderful neurosurgeon down there who was operating on people with brachial plexus injuries. So they had never found a case, obviously, where someone had a missing arm that had nerves available and a paralysed arm. So they conferred with doctors all over the world and came up with this operation. So they did a 9-hour exploratory surgery where they opened up all my neck and chest and measured what nerves I had coming out of my right-hand side where I had the amputation, and how much nerve grafting they needed to do to plug into my left arm. And that was a horrific operation, just that one to get over. And then a week later, they did the big surgery, which was 17.5 hours, and they got nerve grafts out of the backs of my legs and out of my paralysed arm to make grafting across my neck to join the right nerves to the left arm. And they kind of described it as it's like a piece of polythene pipe. So you're joining the nerves with a tunnel for the nerve from the spine to grow down. So it just needed an avenue to grow down, and it would grow a millimetre a day. Can't remember. Anyway, it took about 12 months, and I finally started to get a little flicker of movement in my bicep. So my left arm had gone completely dead, grey looking, no muscle whatsoever, no control over it, wanted to dislocate out of my shoulder. And yes, the surgery, although it hasn't made my arm functional as such, it's made my arm controllable. So I can sort of get it from A to B where I want it to be, and it doesn't want to dislocate out of my shoulder. So as horrific as that surgery was, it was 100% worth going through it.
Mm. Gayle, we were talking yesterday, I think, about when you had those dreadful headaches and you had spinal fluid leaking, and you had to undergo a number of lumbar punctures. So could you just tell that story? Because
so when I was in hospital for the 3 months with my accident, when I started, I was basically bedridden the whole time, but towards the end I started to get up and about when my leg was getting better. But I would sit in the chair and all I would want to do was lie down again. And it wasn't till we went home for the first time and we were home for probably, a month or two, and we went back down for checkups, that I expressed to them how horrific my head was when I was standing up. I'd just get horrific headaches. And when I would lie down, the pain would subside. And for them, straight away, they knew what it was. But where my nerves pulled out of the spinal cord, the spinal fluid, which is what goes up your cord and surrounds your brain and floats what your brain floats in, was just pouring out where the nerves were pulled out of my spinal cord. So basically my brain was sitting on the base of my skull, so it was like a severe beer headache, dehydrated headache. And so straight away, that was the next thing we had to deal with. So they called them blood patches. So they would, first of all, I had to have lumbar punctures. So they'd put dye in my spine, in my lower lumbar, and tilt the bed back, and my whole sort of upper body was x-rayed, and they would see where the dye was running out, and I could see it myself. It was pouring out just below my neck. And so then I would go across to a CT machine, and they would do a blood patch, which was another lumbar puncture type thing, where they put 20 mils of blood against your spinal cord, and it's meant to coagulate the hole and block it, which is what some women that have an epidural have that problem, and they do a blood patch and it stops the leak. But the hole was too big. I had 2 attempts at that, and then they decided they had to operate. So I had a spinal surgery, which was horrific, and it took a long time to get over that one, and the headaches didn't go away straight away. It probably took about 6 months. So I had them for about 12 months, and I used to have all my meals lying down. I'd just lie on a couch, and Mac would give me a meal, and I was doing the books at the time, and the doctors told me to drink coffee, which I didn't drink, and the coffee would stimulate the blood. I don't know how it works, but it would guarantee me about 2 hours of sitting up, and they eventually went away. And then I had 8 years of no headaches, and I'm not 100% sure what started it, because I was started getting them, and I knew they're a completely different sort of headache. I knew it was them, and I went backwards and forwards to Sydney, and they kept saying, no, it's not, and they thought it was my posture and the arm dragging on my neck. So I had 5 lots of nerve burnings they did on my neck to sort of dull the nerve pain or headache pain in my neck, none of which were successful, unfortunately. And then I got flattened by a cow mothering up calves, and from then on they were all the time. And so I persisted with the doctors in Sydney and said, look, I'm 100% sure this is what it is. So they did another lumbar puncture and found that it was straight away. So in the end I had about 9 of those lumbar punctures, which were really not fun. And so then I had to have 2 more lots of spinal surgery to block the leaks. And I bled really, really badly and had 5 blood transfusions. And he said he could never go back in there again because it was too risky. And thank heavens the second one worked. Yeah, it fixed it. It fixed it more or less straight away. But because I bled so badly, lots of blood got into my spinal fluid. And then I had terrible pain associated with that for a long time, until the blood just disappeared out of my spinal fluid. But yeah, I feel like I really need to be careful, because if I have a fall or get knocked over again, it might be something that reoccurs, and they can't really deal with it anymore.
Yeah.
And he did also say, because the second time my spinal leak was for about 4 years, and he said your brain will never go back to where it's really normally meant to sit. It's still prolapsing down your neck to a certain degree. And so I get headaches more often if I get dehydrated. Yeah, but it's certainly a lot better than it was.
Yeah. Gayle, before you talked about her early on in the piece, the acceptance. And I have noticed with you, and I wonder if it's something that's always been in you, if it's a legacy of how you grew up, but you seem to be able to take the emotion out of things when things are bad, you know, and you just know. I've witnessed it so many times with you, like, and I won't talk about specifics, but you just seem to be able to see that's the way it is, and now what do we do? You know, you don't get caught up with, oh, woe is me, and why is this happening? So,
yeah, that I guess when something as drastic as this happens, you make a decision right there or then whether you're going to sink or swim, and you don't really have a choice. If you want to go on and live a happy life, you don't have a choice other than to accept what's happened. And look, I feel in hospital I really did accept it well. Probably my main focus was thinking about not being able to ride horses and that sort of thing and work, but I was just incredibly lucky to have Mac in my life, because not many husbands would do what Mac does. And when I first left hospital and came home, that was the biggest wake-up call for me, because, you know, in hospital, my family were just amazing. Both sides of the family I had people with me all the time, and nurses, and there's always someone there. Whereas once I got home, it wasn't riding horses and working cattle that was the forefront of my mind. It was day-to-day life and care for myself. So that was a big wake-up call. And we had help initially for about a few months. And look, Mac was not very old, and he put his hand up and said, this is going to be a lot easier if I do this. And, you know, to me that is just unbelievable that a young man would pull on what Mac did. And there's not many men that would do it.
No.
And I'm blessed that it. So I guess as things rolled along, you just realise that you've got to accept the blows when they come and cherish the good things in your life that you've got, which I've got a lot of amazing things in my life. And, you know, not being able to ride and compete in those things, it was difficult for the first year. But, I mean, I just decided that I loved watching Mac and watching my family and extended family, and that was my new life. And, you know, the caring and the going from a fiercely independent person to someone that relied on someone for absolutely everything, you know, is very tricky. And it is still even hard to this day to ask people for help, but it's part and parcel of what I've got. And, you know, it's always in the back of my mind when I get older, but that how scary things might be, but I just choose not to think about that until the time comes. Yeah.
I kind of think that things are always put in place as you go along. Like, if you can take the worry out of things, that things work out. You know, there'll be something that will happen that will help you through whatever the next, you know, whatever getting old looks like.
Yeah.
But yeah, you just, like, it must have been a loss of identity. Like, you see yourself as one thing, and then all of a sudden you're something else. So
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And, you know, the person that I was then and the person that I am now are quite different. But I'm so glad that I'm here and not, you know, lost in the accident and passed away and didn't get the rest of my future. And even though this is me now, I'm so glad that I got through it all and survived the accident, and I'm here to see our family and friends grow up and see our horses that we breed and our cattle and our bulls every year. I mean, there's a lot of things in our life to cherish.
Yeah. And for us too, like, we're so grateful that we didn't lose you that day, and especially for our kids, like all your nieces and nephews. And I think, I don't know, I don't know if you know what you give to people just by being who you are and doing what you're doing, but it's enormous. And
yeah, look, and I don't see it myself so much, but it's amazing, you know, people come up to me in the street and say beautiful things, and it really is very heartwarming.
One of the questions was, how do you deal with that because people, the overwhelming kindness that I've seen bestowed upon you, and there's probably lots of things that I don't see, obviously, but how do you deal with that? Because that can be really emotional.
Yeah, and look, I think it started right from when we got home from hospital in Sydney and Moranbah, that our community had a huge fundraiser in Moranbah, which was almost a blur to me because I was still quite ill, but what they did was just unbelievable. And, you know, I also almost feel guilty that I couldn't thank them enough back then for what they did. But and then it's just followed on through the whole 20-odd years of my accident. There's so many good people out there. And, you know, when the Australian Story first aired, I thought, not many city people watch the ABC. And then we'd go to Sydney and people would just come up to us in the street all the time and tell us what me telling my story had helped them. And it makes all of that worthwhile.
Yeah. Yeah. Gayle, did you ever consider leaving Cantor Park, selling up and being closer to town where it was going to be easier for you both?
Yes, well, the answer to that is no. People did suggest that, and I could understand where they were coming from, but we had done so much work there, building it, you know, into what it is now slowly, and we didn't want to walk away from that, and Mac didn't, and I certainly didn't either, so I'm glad we didn't, and it made life a little more challenging, but I wouldn't change it for the world. And, you know, he and I did so much work there together, improving things, that, you know, it's great to have that and know that we did this and we did that together. Yeah. And it's still a bit the same now, even after I got hurt, you know, we're still constantly improving the place and doing it together, and I do all the books, and it's, I would never want to leave, and I'm glad we didn't.
People would be astounded if they saw some of the stuff you do, like you go at muster and you drive the vehicles, and one thing that astounds me is that, because you're right into horse breeding and Mac does all his own, all the scanning and everything, but you can train somebody to scan a mare. You know, you can tell people, and I think, gosh, how do you even do that? Because you've never felt inside the mare, but you see, I don't know how you do it, but it's probably a bit like Beethoven, right?
Yeah.
You know, playing music, but it's amazing. And what I've witnessed you do and what I've witnessed you be able to do.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and look, I love getting out and about, obviously, and I had a modified four-wheeler, which friends of ours did, 2 of them actually. It was amazing. And then I moved onto a buggy, which I just drive with my foot up on the wheel. It's unmodified, and I can drive all the vehicles and the tractor and whatnot, but we're just working on a modified buggy now. But yeah, I love being involved in the mustering, and it makes it easy when I can rip around the outside of the paddock, and makes it all quicker. And we've got lanes everywhere, so Mac and I can nearly almost muster the paddocks on our own. And then in the cattle yard, we built a new cattle yard, and I can work the slides and things. So we just amended things a little so that, you know, I can open and shut the slides when we're preg testing and things like that. And I hate being stuck in the house, so it's wonderful to get out and about. And I hope it never changes as my body slowly wears out.
But it gives you a sense of purpose and independence too, I suppose.
It does. And when my buggy's broken down, I'm lost, checking the mares every day and whatnot. But yeah, I'm very blessed to have what we've got. A lot of people don't have the opportunity to do what we do.
Yeah. I know there's been another very special man in your life apart from Mac, and that's One More Daddy. And you do have a really amazing relationship with that horse, and he seems to know, he seems to understand.
And he came about in our lives when things were tough, you know, early on, and he just gave us so much enjoyment and hope, and we're blessed that it all happened. We bought him when he was a 2-year-old and watched him campaign through his early years, cutting and challenging with some wonderful people, and it really gave us a boost. And then he's 20 now. We've had him in our lives the whole time, and there's something very special about him. And yeah, there's definitely a bond there when we look in each other's eyes. He's a once in a lifetime horse, and he came at exactly the right moment.
Yeah, that's what we said before about things happen right at the right time, you know. Gayle, we were having a conversation the other day about children, and intuitively you somehow knew. So tell me the story about.
Yeah, so I obviously thought I would always have kids, and when Mac and I got married, we talked about it and we said, righto, let's do it when I'm 27, 28. But I must admit, all my life, I never actually saw myself being a mum and with children. I had never intended on not having children, but that was just something that was always with me. I just couldn't see it. And yeah, this is what happened. And when we first left hospital, we both thought that we would try and have children. And when we modified the house, about 3 years after my accident, we accommodated for having kids and a bathtub for kids. But I think it's something that we both just realised would be so difficult, and we would be so reliant on help, and being out of town a bit would make that very difficult. And I felt like it might be very difficult for me relying on other people to do the hands-on stuff and not being able to do it myself. And yeah, look, if it would have been tough. So we both talked about it at length, and we were both on the same page and said, look, this is going to be very difficult. And with my medication, I would have had to go off all my medication as well. And look, it's something we both came to mutually, and I think we're blessed to have the nieces and nephews in our lives that we do, and that's filled the void for both of us.
I mean, I can only speak on our kids' behalf, but I know how much they love you both. And when they were little, they honestly used to just see you as one person. And they'd always say Mac Gayle. They wouldn't say Mac and Gayle. They'd say Mac Gayle because we
went everywhere together.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we were hardly ever apart. Mac would go fishing once a year for a few days. That was about it. So, yeah, there's not many times when we're apart. Yeah. And I mean, our nieces and nephews and family and friends have just been unbelievable all the way through. You know, when I was in rehab and saw people that had no family dealing with their injuries and diseases and things, it was so overwhelming to see what some people were going through on their own. And I think my stint in rehab was a wake-up call to me that there were so many people worse off than me.
And I guess too, apart from family, but you coming back to a beautiful place, and whereas people who live in cities probably just have, you know, their home in the city, in the suburban street to look forward to.
That's right. That's exactly right. I got to go home to the bush and have our surroundings with us and drive out and do things that people in the city don't get to see or do.
Yeah. Gayle, what are some of the funny things that have happened to you? And I just want to tell my funny story because we were at a camp draft, and kids, you know, they see you all the time. They grow up seeing you. But all of a sudden, this one little boy who's known you forever, and I think he must have been 6 or 7 or something, suddenly saw you, stopped in his tracks, sees you every weekend, runs back to his mother and says, Mum, Gayle doesn't have an arm. And she said, oh, darling, she hasn't had an arm for a long time. And it was just it's a funny thing.
Most of the funny things happen with kids because they just say what they see. But that is exactly right. Whether it's our neighbours or our friends at camp drafts or bull sales, they get to a certain age and then all of a sudden they notice it. And then they're like, wow. And then they come up and ask me all these questions and they try and look up my sleeve to see what's up there. And half the time I tell them it was a crocodile. And yeah, so kids are probably the funniest experiences we've had, and parents are a bit horrified at what their kids are saying and doing, but we don't mind at all because that's just kids. Yeah.
One thing I often notice is, because, I mean, you are so beautiful, and I remember the first time I met you, we were at Claremont Horse Sale and you walked into our motel room and I thought, I have never seen a more beautiful girl with beautiful skin. Your skin was just amazing. So you've kept that going.
No, I
looked
haven't.
after yourself.
Anyway.
But people don't notice. If they don't know you, they don't realise that
And quite often, because my paralysed arm is in a sling, they just see the sling and ask you what happened, and they don't notice the amputated arm, and then all of a sudden, a few minutes later, you see their face drop and their blood drain out of their face when they realise that the other one's gone as well.
Some of the funniest looks I've seen are when you and Mac, you know, if there's not a separate disabled toilet, so Mac has to take you into the ladies' toilet, and especially like the boy's sister lives in America, and we've had a couple of trips over there, and they don't seem to have separate disabled toilets, so Mac always has to
go in
there, and so you walk out, and you know people go.
We've had a couple of experiences in pubs and things where we've had to go into the ladies, and I'll talk to the staff beforehand, and then next thing security's trying to bash your door down. That's happened a couple of times. But and at camp just before we had a trailer, we sort of went 5 years before we got a trailer after my accident, a living trailer, and we used to wait till everyone had gone to bed and then go into the ladies' showers, and it was always a bit tricky.
Amy was telling a story the other day about some friends of ours who we didn't know them that well to start with, obviously, and they saw you and Mac, or saw someone going in the middle of the night to the shower, not realising it was you two, and they thought, oh, that must be just what you do, so we'll do that too.
That's funny.
But anyway, what are some of the most difficult things, Gayle, that people might, think of that you deal with every day or that you've had to deal with?
Yeah, look, I think, and I mean, these things all fade with time, you get over it. I think initially when I'd meet new people, if new people came to work for us, because they'd never seen me do things myself, you sort of felt like they thought you weren't capable of doing much or anything, and that was hard, trying to not prove myself to people, but realise that I had to just not worry about that, or else I'd make myself crazy. And losing a certain amount of my personality and who I was, fiercely independent, and breaking my own horses in and shoeing with my own horses and loving the cattle side of things. But I mean, all of those things are still part of our lives. I may not just be doing some of the physical things, but another thing is pain. Like, people probably don't understand the pain that I feel most of the time. It's pain does terrible things to you. But, and just learning to not worry about what people think of you.
One thing I've noticed with Mac is he is conditioned now to just doing things for you, but not just for you, but for other people, like for his nephews and nieces, and even me. He'll brush my hair off or something. He just does it.
Yeah, like he's so used to tucking my hair or doing something. He's sometimes accidentally just reached over and tucked someone else's hair behind their ear. Yeah. But it's just amazing what he does. And I mean, he's so busy with the rest of his life. It's incredible how he juggles it both and fits it all in. And, another thing about what other people mightn't realise is it takes us a long time to get ready. So, if we appear outside the van at a camp draft at 6 o'clock, we've been up for an hour and a half before that getting ready. And, we always seem to be the last ones to leave the social setting, and it takes so long to have a shower and go to bed. So, yeah, people don't see the behind the scenes and how long it takes for Mac to get me up and going in the morning and help me get ready and put makeup on and get dressed and give me breakfast and, yeah, all those things.
It's interesting because neither of you have ever made it an excuse. You've never ever said, well, we can't do that because we've got to, we've got to get Gayle ready, or we've got to do this or that, and especially with your breeding cattle, and I mean, you've excelled where other people, have failed, I suppose. But it's amazing to see how driven you both are. And
and as Mac's got older, he's got more and more driven, and he absolutely loves the cattle and bull selling side of things, and he's certainly not one to say no to anything. He's heavily involved in camp draft judging clinics and things. He's always contributing out time and finances to society, to what he loves. Yeah.
But you too, I mean, you're a judge, and you go to all those judges' clinics and help people. And, And I'm with a group of fun ladies that fundraise, and that's a big part of our lives too. And I love being involved with that, and it's giving back and raising money for charities every year. And so much was done for me. I feel like I had to give back, so I really enjoy my time and effort towards that. I'm the merchandise girl, so I do all that on the computer. That's the Classic Ladies
Classic Ladies Foundation, yes, which was formed through the horse sale in Tamworth initially.
And Gayle, I just have one more question. So, and I've been thinking a lot about happiness, and we have stuff that happens to us in our lives when we probably don't feel so happy, but I think at the end of my life I will look back and think, I've had a happy life. And do you think you'll be the same?
Oh, absolutely. As many injuries and things I've got, we are both love doing what we're doing, and we wouldn't choose to do anything else in the world. So we can't ask for any more, and we're both incredibly happy with what we're doing and where we're at in our lives. And my injury was just part of that journey, and I don't know what my life would have looked like now if I hadn't been hurt, but I'm just so grateful and happy to be alive, and happy to have Mac as my husband and the people in our lives that we do. And I looked at my parents. They had tough times. So 4 girls. Number 2 girl contracted polio at 13 months old. My youngest sister was born intellectually handicapped. My injury when I was 27, and all these things they had to deal with when we were young, and we lived on a very isolated place. I just feel so blessed that Mac and I are so happy together and living where we want to live and doing what we want with our lives.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Gayle. I think we're all very blessed to have you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Kelly. You do a wonderful job.
Thank you for watching and listening to my interview. If you'd like to hear more inspiring stories, subscribe to my YouTube channel or my podcast, and follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Life Journey TV.